everyone, it's Catherine from A Perfect Place to Start, and today we're going to be recreating our own vintage DIY ornaments and then using them in some DIYs. So the first technique we're going to try out is this nail polish remover technique, and I picked up several different types of ornaments. So I picked up glass ornaments, plastic ornaments, matte ornaments, shiny ornaments, just so I could kind of get a feel for what type of ornament worked best for each technique. So for this one, I just poured some fingernail polish remover into a bowl, and I'm using some facial wipe cleaners that I picked up at the Dollar Tree to rub all over the ornaments. So I did find this technique to be the best technique I tried all day. It did not work on the mirrored ornaments, and it did not work on any of the glass ornaments. But I did get it to work on the Walmart and Dollar Tree kind of plastic ornaments that were shiny, and it did work slightly on the matte finished ornaments. But here's a look at how they turned out after using the fingernail polish. The one on the right, and then this one is the one on the left, is the one that was used with the fingernail polish, and the shiny glass ornaments did not work at all. So the second technique is a vinegar technique, and you were supposed to just use distilled vinegar, and you were supposed to rub it onto the ornaments, and it was supposed to take the finish off. So at first I tried rubbing it with those same cloths, and then that wasn't working at all on any of the ornaments that I tried. And so then I decided to just put them in my bowl and let them sit there for 5 minutes, and nothing happened to my ornaments. So I definitely think that this one is a waste of time. So the third technique I tried to use was a wire brush technique, and this brush is super heavy duty. It was in the garage. My husband let me borrow it. So I used these on all the types of ornaments that I had today, and I definitely found that this technique worked the best on the glass ornaments, and definitely I tried it on the silver, red, and green ornaments, and it did work out really, really well. So overall, I mean, if you want to DIY your own ornaments, you definitely can. I do think that it is a tad bit time consuming, and there are definitely certain types of ornaments that you're going to want to DIY. So these glass ones definitely worked the best for this wire brush. You can see on the left hand side that they're scratched up and more dull than the right hand side. So let's get into the DIYs. So here we are, we're trying to decide if making our own ornaments are better than buying vintage ornaments that they have out now. So this first project is a Santa Topiary, and I'm just going to take this cone that I picked up at the Dollar Tree, and this Santa mug is one that I picked up at a garage sale. So I have quite the Santa collection at my house, and I thought this would be super fun to recreate so that he can go into my Santa collection. So I'm just using one of those Greenery pieces from the Dollar Tree. It's the Garland, and I'm going to wrap it all around this cone, gluing periodically as I go up. So I use about 2/3 of the wreath to cover, or it's not really a wreath, the garland, to cover this styrofoam cone. And then I'm going to take my ornaments. I took the hanging piece off of them, and I'm just putting hot glue around them and sticking them into my greenery. So I'm using the ornaments from Walmart and from the Dollar Tree for this project, and these were the ones that we DIY'd along with some vintage ornaments that I just picked up. And I have to say that, I mean, it's fun to use the ones that we created, but I think that the ones that I picked up at Walmart and the Dollar Tree were just as vintage looking and definitely a lot less work. So for this project, we're going to be creating a vintage evergreen wreath, and so I'm just using an evergreen wreath form that I had picked up at Hobby Lobby on a severe clearance. They still do sell them there right now as well, and I'm just using Rust-Oleum with primer, spray paint, and white. Then these are the ornaments that we DIY'd earlier on in the video with the wire brush, and definitely these give all the vintage feels in this wreath with the spray paint. So of all the ornaments that I DIY'd today, these were definitely my favorite and came out, I feel like, the most vintage. However, they are actual glass, which kind of limits where and how you hang them, just because you don't want them to fall off the wreath and break, or you don't want the wreath to fall, or whatever you're creating with them to fall and break as well, which is kind of why I don't use a whole lot of glass ornaments. But these were too cute not to pass up and not actually make something with. So I'm just going to go around the wreath and kind of strategically place them. I have grouping of red, green, and silver, and then I have just silver by themselves. And so I'm just going to go ahead and place that all around the wreath. So once I get those bulbs all placed in the wreath form, I'm going to go ahead and take this bow, which came from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to secure it into the middle of the top. I thought this bow did really give me some vintage vibes. I liked the green and red, and since my bulbs were green and red, I thought that it went really well. So I had picked up these tiny vintage ornaments at a discount store we have in our town. There were three different ones. There was a nutcracker guy, a snowman, and a Santa, and so I just placed them in groupings around inside the wreath. And then here's the final look of the project. I definitely get all the vintage feels from this wreath. You guys let me know down below if you think this technique was worth it or not. So this last project is made basically with ornaments that I picked up at the Dollar Tree and Walmart. So there's not a lot of the homemade vintage ornaments in this project. Only a few of the very tiny pink ones are left to go in here. So I took this tinsel garland that I got at Walmart, and I took a pool noodle and I just wrapped the pool noodle around and used some duct tape from the Dollar Tree. And now I'm just going to wrap this tinsel garland around the whole pool noodle. So tinsel was very popular back in the 60s, and so it definitely gives a vintage feel whenever you can use tinsel. So this tinsel garland, it took me a little over 2 garlands, so I had to buy 3 garlands to make this. However, I think when I was wrapping the first garland, I could have overlapped it a little without realizing it, and so I think you could get away with 2 tinsel garlands, but just in case, buy 3. And then I'm just varying the ornaments that I picked up. So the majority of these are from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just grouping them: a white one, a pink one, a beige one, and I just sort of go in a pattern that's pleasing to my eye. So if you're not into the pinks and beiges, you know, you can definitely recreate this in any color scheme that you want. They have so many tinsel garlands over at Walmart, and they're super pretty, and it gives you all the vintage feels without even having to do any extra work for it. So after I get them grouped into groups of 3, then I go back with some bigger bulbs, and I'm going to go on the outside of the wreath with just 1 bulb. So I'm kind of filling in the spaces between the groups of 3, and I'm going to do that on the entire outside of this wreath. So like I said, the majority of these ornaments were store-bought in. That is one kind of tip and trick about vintage decor, is if you're using tinsel, you can lay your ornaments inside of the wreath, kind of like we're doing here for this project, and you take up a lot less space and you still get a wonderfully vintage vibe from it. So when I think about vintage ornaments, I tend to think more on the sides of pinks and teals. You can see in the project that we did previous to this one, you can do red and green, but a lot of vintage decor around Christmas is pink and teal. So that was kind of the inspiration I had going with this wreath. So again, I'm just like strategically placing these in between the groups of 3, and I did hot glue all of the ornaments into this wreath. Because it was a pool noodle, I just put a heavy amount of hot glue on the end here, and then I kind of stabbed it into my pool noodle, and so it had a pretty good hold. You can see one of them sort of fell off here on the right hand side, but that was the only mishap I had in this whole wreath. So then I'm going to do the exact same process on the inside rim of this wreath that I just did on the outer rim. And so I'm just going in between the groupings of 3, and I'm interchanging the different colors of bulbs that I have. So most of the ones that I bought at the Dollar Tree, I think the only bulbs on this wreath that came from Walmart are the little tiny pink ones that we DIY'd for our vintage ornaments. Otherwise, all the other ornaments on this wreath came from the Dollar Tree. So I just randomly go around, and if you can see over here on the right, I put all of my ornaments in a bowl mixed together so that all I had to do was kind of grab a color that I wanted. That made it really easy to assemble this wreath. So if you're doing any kind of big projects like that, you kind of want to have all your supplies laid out for you before you start. So now I'm going back in with the very smallest ornaments that we have. Some of these are the ones that we DIY'd, and some of them are just gold bulbs that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And these end up being the filler for the rest of my wreath. So to complete this wreath, I do take some of that shabby chic ribbon from the Dollar Tree and I loop it through the top of the wreath, tie just a little knot at the top for my hanger, and then here is the final look of this wreath. I cannot tell you how much I love the look of this, and honestly, we didn't DIY hardly maybe 5 ornaments in this whole wreath. So again, the title of my video, was it worth it? I guess it kind of just depends on the style of the wreath that you're going for. I felt like it wasn't worth it in the end because this wreath ends up being my totally favorite project of the day. So you guys let me know down in the comments below if you think that it was worth DIYing, and let me know which of the projects was your favorite. If you liked this video, watch this next video on how I made some Dollar Tree vintage ornaments, and as always, wherever you are in your journey is a perfect place to start, and I will see you in my next video.